Emma had always loved the smell of fresh lumber and morning coffee mingling in the office of Hammond Construction. For 5 years, she had walked through those doors every morning at 7 sharp. Her brother Oliver, already at his desk reviewing blueprints, and Julian Reed pulling up in his truck moments later. The three of them had fallen into a rhythm so natural it felt like breathing. Oliver had started the company with Julian 8 years ago, back when they were fresh out of college with more ambition than sense. Emma joined after finishing her business degree, initially handling paperwork and client calls. But she was a Hammond, which meant she learned every aspect of the business. She could read architectural plans, negotiate with suppliers, and manage project timelines with the same efficiency she brought to balancing the books. Julian had been part of their lives for so long that Emma barely remembered a time before him. He had been Oliver's roommate, his best man at his wedding before the divorce. The person who sat with their family when their father passed away. He was steady, reliable, and completely woven into the fabric of her world. She never noticed when things started to shift. It happened gradually, during the late nights when Oliver left early to handle site emergencies, and Emma stayed behind with Julian to finish bids and proposals. They would order takeout, work until the numbers blurred, and talk about everything except the work in front of them. Julian told her about his childhood, about the pressure from his father to take over the family law firm instead of getting his hands dirty with construction. Emma shared her fears about never being taken seriously because she was the owner's little sister. "You're more than that," Julian had said one evening, looking up from a spreadsheet. "Oliver knows it. I know it. This company would fall apart without you holding it together." The compliment had warmed her more than it should have. Emma was 27, old enough to recognize the flutter in her chest when Julian smiled at her. Young enough to believe she could control it. She told herself it was just admiration for a colleague. Julian was 33, established, respected in their industry. He had dated casually over the years, but never seriously, always claiming the business came first. Emma convinced herself that their late-night conversations and shared glances across the office were simply friendship. Nothing more. Then the Riverside project started falling apart. It was their biggest contract, a luxury development that would establish Hammond Construction as a major player. But the investors got cold feet, permits were delayed, and costs spiraled. Oliver was managing 3 other sites and couldn't give Riverside the attention it needed. The burden fell on Julian, and Emma watched him slowly crumble under the pressure. He started staying later, his confidence replaced by exhaustion. Emma found him one night with his head in his hands, surrounded by rejected proposals. "We're going to lose it," he said quietly. "Everything we've built. I'm going to lose it." Emma pulled up a chair beside him. "You're not alone in this. Let me help." They worked together for 3 weeks straight, restructuring the budget, finding new investors, smooth-talking reluctant contractors. Emma saw a side of Julian she had never witnessed before. The vulnerability beneath his confident exterior, the fear of failure, the loneliness of carrying so much responsibility. He needed her, and being needed by him felt intoxicating. The night they saved the Riverside project, Julian opened a bottle of whiskey he kept in his desk drawer. They were alone in the office, the city quiet outside the windows. The relief was palpable, electric. "I couldn't have done this without you," Julian said, pouring 2 glasses. "Oliver is lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have you." Emma's heart hammered. "We're partners." "That's what partners do. Is that all we are?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with everything they had been carefully avoiding. She should have left. Should have made an excuse, grabbed her coat, driven home to her small apartment, in the safety of boundaries. But the way Julian was looking at her, like she was the answer to every question he had been too afraid to ask, made her forget every reason why this was dangerous. "Julian, we can't," she whispered, even as she leaned closer. "I know," he replied, but he was closing the distance between them. The kiss was inevitable and catastrophic. It tasted like whiskey and terrible decisions. Emma knew it was wrong, knew Oliver would never forgive either of them. But Julian's hands were in her hair, and years of suppressed feelings were pouring out of her like a broken dam. They crossed every line that night on the leather couch in his office. Emma gave him everything she had been holding back. believing in the moment that this meant something real, that the tenderness in his touch was a promise. Afterward, lying in the dark with her head on his chest, Emma felt the weight of what they had done. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Julian was quiet for a long time. "I don't know." She waited for more, for reassurance, for anything that sounded like a plan. But Julian just held her, and in the silence, Emma felt the first whisper of dread. The next morning, everything changed. Julian arrived at the office with his usual coffee, greeted Oliver with their customary handshake, and barely looked at Emma. She told herself he was being professional, that they needed to figure things out privately. But days passed, then a week, and Julian treated her like a colleague, nothing more. When she tried to catch him alone, he made excuses. When she suggested they talk, he said there was nothing to discuss. The man who had held her, who had whispered her name like a prayer, now avoided her eyes across the conference table. Emma felt herself fracturing. She replayed that night obsessively, searching for signs she had misread everything. Maybe it had been just physical for him, a release of stress and nothing deeper. But she remembered the way he had touched her face, the raw emotion in his voice. That had been real, hadn't it? Oliver noticed her distraction. "You okay, Em? You've been off lately." "Just tired," she lied, forcing a smile. "The Riverside project took a lot out of me. Took a lot out of all of us," Oliver agreed. "But we did it. You and Julian pulled off a miracle." The casual pairing of their names made Emma's stomach turn. Oliver trusted them both completely. He had no idea that his best friend and his sister had betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. Julian continued his retreat, building walls where there had been warmth. During meetings, he was polite but distant. The late-night work sessions stopped. He started leaving early, delegating tasks to Emma through email rather than talking to her directly. Emma wanted to be angry, but mostly she felt confused and hurt. She had given him everything, exposed herself completely, and he was treating her like a mistake he wanted to forget. 5 weeks after that night, Emma sat in her car in the office parking lot, staring at the pregnancy test in her shaking hands. 2 pink lines. Positive. The world tilted sideways. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had been careful, or she thought they had, but apparently not careful enough. Emma pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the panic. A baby. She was going to have Julian's baby. And she had absolutely no idea what to do. Emma spent 3 days staring at the positive pregnancy test before she could fully process what it meant. She took 2 more tests, then a 4th, hoping the results would somehow change. They never did. The reality remained stubbornly, terrifyingly consistent. She was pregnant with Julian Reed's child. At first, there was panic. Raw, breathless panic that made her wake up at 3 in the morning with her heart racing. But underneath the fear, something else grew. A tiny spark of hope. Maybe this would force Julian to acknowledge what happened between them. Maybe when faced with this reality, he would remember that night, remember the connection they shared, and step up. She had known Julian for years. He was responsible, honorable, the kind of man Oliver trusted with his business and his life. Surely that man wouldn't abandon her. Surely he would do the right thing. Emma practiced the conversation 100 times in her head. She would be calm, direct. She would tell him privately, give him time to process, and together they would figure out a plan. It wouldn't be easy, especially telling Oliver. But they would handle it together. She caught Julian leaving the office on a Friday evening. Her hands were trembling as she approached his truck. "Julian, I need to talk to you." "It's important." He glanced at his watch, impatient. "Can it wait until Monday?" "I have plans." "No, it can't wait." Emma's voice cracked slightly. "Please, just 5 minutes." Something in her tone made him stop. They walked to the empty break room, and Emma closed the door behind them. Her carefully rehearsed words evaporated. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. "It's yours." The color drained from Julian's face. For a moment, he just stared at her, and Emma saw something she had never seen in him before. Not concern or shock, but cold calculation. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "We were careful." Apparently not careful enough. Emma tried to keep her voice steady. I've taken 4 tests. I saw a doctor yesterday. I'm 6 weeks along. Julian turned away from her, running his hands through his hair. When he faced her again, his expression had hardened into something unrecognizable. This is a problem, he said, and the clinical detachment in his voice made Emma's blood run cold. A problem? She repeated, Julian, this is our child. No. His voice was sharp. This is your problem. I don't know what you're trying to pull, Emma, but I'm not falling for it. Emma felt like she'd been slapped. What are you talking about? You know exactly what happened between us. Do I? One night, Emma. One time. And now you're conveniently pregnant? Julian's eyes narrowed. How do I even know it's mine? For all I know, you've been seeing someone else. The accusation hit her like a physical blow. How dare you? You know I haven't. You know exactly what this is. What I know, Julian said coldly, is that I'm Oliver's partner. His best friend? Do you have any idea what this would do to him? To the business? To everything we've built? So you're just going to pretend it didn't happen? Emma's voice rose. I was there, Julian. I know what we shared that night. It wasn't nothing. It was a mistake. Julian cut her off. A drunken mistake that should have never happened. And I'm not letting it destroy my life. Emma stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time. The man she thought she knew, the man she had trusted, didn't exist. Or maybe he had never existed at all. What about the baby? She whispered. That's your choice to make. But leave me out of it. Julian moved toward the door. If you try to claim I'm the father, I'll deny it. You have no proof. It would be your word against mine, and everyone knows how much you've always admired me. They'll think you're obsessed, trying to trap me. I loved you, Emma said, the words breaking. Julian paused at the door. Then you were foolish. Don't contact me about this again, Emma. Handle it quietly, or you'll regret making this public. He left, and Emma sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. The man who had held her, who had needed her, who had whispered that he was lucky to have her, had just threatened her into silence. The following weeks became a nightmare Emma walked through in a daze. She showed up to work because she didn't know what else to do, sitting at her desk while nausea rolled through her and Julian pretended. She didn't exist, but ignoring her wasn't enough for him. Julian started making her life impossible. He questioned her work in front of Oliver. Small mistakes she made were blown out of proportion. He reassigned her projects to other staff members, claiming she seemed overwhelmed. When Emma tried to defend herself, Julian wore an expression of concerned professionalism that made her want to scream Mrs. Patterson. The office manager, who had worked there for 20 years, started giving Emma strange looks. The whispers began circulating. Emma heard fragments in the break room. Saw the way conversations stopped when she entered. She's been acting strange lately. I heard she's been throwing herself at Julian for months. Poor thing has always had a crush on him. It's embarrassing, Emma realized with dawning horror, that Julian was systematically destroying her reputation. He was planting seeds, spreading implications, making sure that if she ever spoke up, no one would believe her. The stress made her morning sickness worse. She started missing work, calling in sick, unable to face Julian's cold stares and the office gossip. Oliver noticed his concern, genuine but misplaced. Emma, what's going on with you? Julian says you've been making errors, missing deadlines. That's not like you. She wanted to tell him everything right then, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain that his best friend, the man he trusted more than anyone, had used her and thrown her away? I'm just not feeling well, she managed. Maybe you should take some time off. Get yourself together. It was Julian who delivered the final blow. He called her into his office 2 months into her pregnancy, Oliver conveniently away at a site inspection. This isn't working, Julian said without preamble. Your performance has been subpar, and it's affecting the company. I think it's best if you resign. Emma's jaw dropped. You can't fire me. Oliver would never allow it. I'm not firing you. I'm strongly suggesting you resign for personal reasons. Otherwise, I'll have to document your performance issues formally. Julian slid a folder across the desk. I've been keeping records. Late arrivals, missed deadlines, errors in estimates. It's all here. Emma flipped through the folder, seeing her work twisted into incompetence, her sick days framed as unreliability. You did this deliberately, she breathed. You've been setting me up. Been protecting this company from an employee who can't handle her responsibilities. Julian's voice was like ice. You have until the end of the week to decide. Resign quietly or face a formal review that will end your career in this industry. Your choice. Emma looked at the man before her and felt something inside her die. The last fragile hope that Julian might somehow become the person she thought he was, shattered. Completely. I'll resign. She whispered. Good. I'll let Oliver know you've decided to pursue other opportunities. He'll be disappointed, but he'll understand. Emma walked out of that office knowing she had just lost everything. Her job, her financial security, her place in the family business. Julian had systematically stripped away every piece of stability she had, leaving her pregnant, alone, and broken. That night, sitting in her apartment with her hand on her barely visible belly, Emma cried until she had nothing left. The man who refused to accept his own child had won. He had isolated her, silenced her, made sure that speaking the truth would cost her everything. But as she sat in the darkness, feeling the tiny life growing inside her, Emma made a decision. She couldn't keep carrying this weight alone. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. It was time to tell Oliver everything. Emma sat across from her brother in his living room, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. Oliver had been surprised when she asked to come over on a Sunday morning, but he had welcomed her with his usual warmth, completely unaware that she was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of his life. You look terrible. Oliver said, concern etched on his face. What's going on? And don't tell me you're just tired. I've been worried about you for weeks. Emma took a shaky breath. There was no easy way to say this, no way to soften the blow. I'm pregnant. Oliver blinked, processing. Oh wow, Are you okay? Is there a guy I should know about? There is, Emma said quietly. It's Julian. The silence that followed was deafening. Oliver's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, denial. He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. That's not funny, Emma. I'm not joking. Her voice broke. I wish I was. Oliver turned to face her, his expression hardening. Julian? My Julian? My best friend and business partner, Julian Reed. Yes. No. Oliver shook his head. No, that's impossible. Julian would never. You two barely even talk, Emma laughed bitterly. We talked plenty. All those late nights working on Riverside, all those times you left us alone to finish proposals. We talked, Oliver. And one night it became more. You're telling me Julian got you pregnant and said nothing? For months. Oliver's voice rose. He's been working next to me every single day, and he never mentioned it. He doesn't just not mention it. He denies it completely. Emma's hands were shaking. When I told him, he accused me of trying to trap him. He said I had no proof, that it was my word against his. Then he made my life so miserable at work that I had to resign. Wait, you didn't resign to pursue other opportunities? That's what Julian told you, isn't it? Emma's laugh was hollow. He systematically destroyed my reputation, documented false performance issues, and gave me a choice: resign quietly or be fired publicly. I'm 3 months pregnant, broke, and completely alone because your best friend refuses to accept his own child. Oliver stood frozen, his face pale. Emma, this is insane. Julian wouldn't do this. There has to be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Emma pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. I have text messages from that night. I have the dates documented. I have medical records showing exactly when I got pregnant. And if you need more proof, there are DNA tests we can do after the baby is born. She watched her brother struggle with the information, saw the moment his doubt began to crack. Oliver had known her entire life. He knew when she was lying, and he could see she wasn't lying now. Why didn't you tell me sooner? His voice was anguished, because I was ashamed. Because I was scared. Because I thought maybe Julian would come around, that he would do the right thing. Emma wiped her eyes. I kept thinking about how this would hurt you, destroy your friendship, damage the business. But I can't carry this alone anymore, Oliver. I can't let him erase me and pretend this baby doesn't exist. Oliver sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. I brought him into our family. I trusted him with everything. So did I, Emma whispered. The next morning, Oliver walked into Hammond Construction with a purpose Emma had only seen once before. When their father died and he had to take over the company at 25, Julian was already at his desk, coffee in hand, reviewing blueprints. "Oh, we need to talk," Oliver said. "My office. Now." Julian followed, casual and unconcerned. The door closed behind them. "What's this about?" Julian asked. Oliver placed Emma's phone on the desk, messages displayed, then medical records, then a timeline Emma had documented. "My sister is pregnant," Oliver said, his voice deadly calm, "and you're the father." Julian's mask of composure slipped for just a second before he recovered. "Oliver, I don't know what Emma told you, but she's confused. We're colleagues, nothing more. Don't." Oliver's voice cut like a knife. "Don't you dare lie to me. I know my sister, Julian. I know when she's telling the truth. She's had feelings for me for years. Everyone in the office has noticed. This is what happens when someone gets obsessed." Julian's voice was smooth, practiced. "I feel bad for her, truly, but I'm not responsible for whatever situation she's gotten herself into. You're lying." Oliver pulled out his phone. "Want to know how I know?" "Because I called Mrs. Patterson this morning. Asked her about all those late nights you and Emma worked together. She remembers Julian. She remembers you two leaving together. Remembers the night of the Riverside celebration when you both stayed late. She remembers things changing between you." Julian's composure cracked further. "That doesn't prove anything. Then there's the security footage from the office building. Want to know what it shows from that night in April? You and Emma entering your office at 9 p.m., neither of you leaving until 2 a.m. Oliver's voice shook with rage. "I pulled the logs this morning. The timestamps don't lie. Oliver, listen to me." Julian's voice took on a pleading quality. "Even if something happened, it was one mistake. One time. She can't prove that baby is mine. So you admit it happened." Julian realized his error too late. "I'm saying hypothetically, even if something occurred once, that doesn't mean I'm responsible for her pregnancy." "Get out," Oliver said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my office. Get out of my building. Get out of my company." Oliver's voice was shaking now. "You are fired, effective immediately. I want your desk cleared by end of day. I'll be buying out your shares in the company at the minimum value allowed in our partnership agreement. You will never set foot on any of our job sites again. Can't do this." Julian's professional facade finally shattered completely. "I built this company with you. Half of everything we have is because of my work, my contacts, my reputation. Your reputation." Oliver laughed bitterly. "Let's talk about your reputation. Because I'm going to make sure everyone in this industry knows exactly what kind of man you are. Every contractor, every supplier, every potential client. They're going to know you've got my sister pregnant and abandoned her. They're going to know you harassed her out of her job. They're going to know you're the kind of man who threatens a woman into silence." Julian's face went white. "You destroy both our careers over this." "No, Julian. You already destroyed your own career. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." The fallout was swift and brutal. By the end of the week, the story had spread through their professional community like wildfire. Oliver didn't have to exaggerate or embellish. He simply told the truth, backed by documentation Emma had kept. Julian's father, Thomas Reed, called Oliver personally. The conversation was brief and devastating for Julian. Thomas had built his law firm on integrity, and when faced with the evidence of his son's actions, he offered no protection. Instead, he reached out to Emma directly with an apology and an offer to cover all medical expenses and establish a trust fund for the baby. "My son is a coward," Thomas told Emma over the phone, his voice heavy with disappointment. "But this child is my grandchild, and I will not abandon my responsibilities even if Julian has abandoned his." Julian found himself systematically shut out of the industry he had helped build. Contracts were quietly canceled. Business relationships went cold. His reputation, the thing he had been so desperate to protect, was destroyed not by lies, but by the truth of his own actions. Emma, meanwhile, focused on healing. Her childhood friend Grace moved in to help her through the pregnancy. Oliver made sure she had everything she needed, financial worry removed from her plate. Most importantly, Emma started therapy, working through the betrayal and finding the strength she had lost. On a cold February morning, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Sophie, after their grandmother. Oliver was in the delivery room, tears streaming down his face as he held his knees for the first time. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Emma looked at her daughter, at the tiny life she had created, and felt something shift inside her. For months, she had been defined by what Julian had done to her, by the pain and betrayal. But looking at Sophie's face, Emma realized that this child was not a consequence or a mistake. Sophie was hers, wholly and completely, and that was enough. Julian never came to the hospital. He never called or sent a message. Through his lawyer, he signed away all parental rights, wanting no legal connection to the child he refused to acknowledge. Emma signed the papers without hesitation. Sophie deserved better than a father who saw her as a problem to be solved. 6 months later, Emma stood in the newly opened branch of Hammond Construction, Sophie in a carrier strapped to her chest. Oliver had made her a full partner, equal ownership, her name on the door. The company was thriving, Julian's absence barely noticed as new partnerships formed. Emma looked at her reflection in the office window. She saw a woman who had been broken and had rebuilt herself stronger. A woman who had been silenced and had found her voice. A woman who had been abandoned and had discovered she never needed rescuing in the first place. Sophie made a small sound, and Emma smiled, adjusting the carrier. "You and me, sweet girl, we're going to be just fine." And for the first time in months, Emma believed it completely. Julian had tried to erase her, to make her disappear into shame and silence. But she had refused to vanish. She had stood up, spoken her truth, and built a life that didn't need him in it. The betrayal had nearly destroyed her. But in the end, it had revealed exactly who she was. A survivor, a mother, and a woman who knew her worth. Julian would have to live with his choices, with the reputation he had destroyed and the daughter he would never know. Emma had made her choice too. She chose Sophie, chose dignity, chose the future she would build with her own hands. And that was the greatest. Victory of all, thank you for taking the time to listen to this story if you enjoyed this content. Don't forget to hit like, share this story with your friends, send family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.